Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Football House presented by House Enterprise. I'm Sam Basil, joined alongside Will Tondo. Cole Hughes will be on the way relatively soon. But as you could tell, it's Thanksgiving week. I'm assuming, Will, you're also filming this from your childhood bedroom. But the grind never stops. Football never stops, and especially this week, it will never stop because this is rivalry week. We've got some fantastic games up on deck this weekend. Some have already happened. I know the Egg Bowl was already, a huge hit this year. But we've got some great games on the Friday, late Friday, and Saturday slate that we can't wait to talk about. Will, how you doing?
We're doing well. Happy Thanksgiving. Seen Basil a couple times in person, which is always good this week. We played our annual SFL Southold Football League Turkey Bowl. Basil was an absolute menace. Heart of the game, heart of the field. He called game at the end and scored the game-winning touchdown. I felt I was doing pretty well. Now my chest is killing me and I'm sore because we're old men now. We're not these young bucks that can play. But yeah, it is rivalry week. It's Black Friday. We got 20 minutes until some NFL football. So it's a nice week to kick back and relax, but some great college football games on the slate this weekend. And of course, like you mentioned, Egg Bowl was a hit last night. A lot of playoff implications. I keep seeing the memes coming up of potential college football committee chaos that might happen, the 4Cs pretty much. What happens if Texas wins out and Ohio State beats Michigan this week, and if Alabama wins out and beats out Georgia? There's a lot of crazy stuff coming up, but we'll focus on obviously the weekend games ahead.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is too controversial, but we've already got some, not controversy yet, but some contention in the playoff committee regarding their decisions. I feel like this was maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe last week or 2 weeks ago, where we talked about the Football House, our own philosophy, right, on maintaining rankings from week to week, because it's really tough. I mean, you look at the top 5 teams right now. I'm just going to read off their rankings according to the College Football Playoff Committee. Respectively, it's Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, and Florida State, right?
I
And
believe it's
those
actually
teams.
Washington.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Washington, and Florida State. Now, it's really hard, right, when you're getting at this point in the season, because all 5 of these schools are 11-0. And, we at the Football House, we pretty much all were in agreement that if you are an undefeated team, it's pretty hard for you to move down, to justify us moving you down if you're not losing. I know, you talk about strength of schedule and margin of victory and the quality of the opponents that you play, and that's really important. But, there's kind of a weird feeling that you have, right, when you move Ohio State over Georgia, or Washington over Florida State, right? Just because it's like Florida hasn't really done anything wrong, but they've still gone down. And while I find fairness, like I don't think it's unfair that Washington is 4th in the college football playoff rankings, it's just tough. It's a tough argument to sell. So, Will, I just wanted to kind of get your opinion as we get closer and closer. We have 2 college football playoff rankings left. We have the one after rivalry week, and then we have that last one that gets put out at the end of all the conference championship games. So for you right now, are you in agreement with the committee that the top 4 is Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, and Washington?
I do. I'm still iffy if Ohio State should have been at higher than Michigan. I don't know. I think Michigan has a tremendous defense. They have Heisman candidate potential with a couple players, but so I agree with the 4, especially because with Florida State, unfortunately, losing their quarterback in Jordan Travis for the year, I think that probably kicked them down a leg. It will be interesting to see, though, is after this weekend, perfect scenario of a Florida State upset or not. I don't know if it's an upset. They might still be favorites, but if Florida State beats Florida and remains undefeated and Washington remains undefeated, we're going to have a 12-1 team an 11-1 team between Michigan and Ohio State. Do they fall out of the top 4? I don't know.
Yeah, and look, we've seen it before. We've seen both of these teams. We've seen both Michigan and Ohio State in the college football playoff together. When one of them, not only does one of them have one loss, but their one loss is to the other. So it's going to be tough. It's just continuing that never-ending, kind of philosophical debate about what the college football playoff committee should do. And it looks like after this year, that question's really going to go. It could really go unanswered as next year, obviously, we move into the 12-team playoff. But let's get into our picks for this week for Rivalry Week. Starting off with you, Tondo. Oh, and we're welcoming Cole Hughes to the stage. Cole, how you doing, man? Can't really tell if he seems to be frozen right
he
there.
Might be frozen.
We got He's moving in slow motion right now.
Cole Hughes is
You guys got me?
Yeah, well, we got you now. I don't know if we still got you. Yes, I can hear you now, and you're moving slightly in sync with your audio up, and he's gone again. All right. Well, while we wait for Cole to get back on, Tondo, why don't you go through your card? Start off with your FBS and FCS locks of the week, and then give your regular cards, your regular picks, and then hold off on game of the week.
Sure thing. So, my FBS lock of the week is going to be Kansas -7 versus Cincinnati. I was surprised that line is as low as it is. I do love, I don't think Cincinnati has performed as well as years past, and Kansas has a lot to, be proud of this season. For my FCS lock, I'm going to go North Dakota money line over Sacramento State. For the rest of my card, I got Alabama outright over Auburn. I got Arizona -11 versus Arizona State. I have Florida +7, but Florida State still winning. Like I mentioned before, who knows what this team's going to look like without Jordan Travis. But, I do think that they can take home the win right now against, their rival. I like Washington State over 66. A lot of points to be had in that game. I like Texas Tech to cover 14 and Texas to win. I like Georgia Tech to cover 24 and Georgia to win. And I'll take Rutgers money line over Maryland.
Yeah, I like those cards. I like how you picked out some really good rivalries. Obviously, Washington State being the Apple Cup. And some good news for all of you Apple Cup fans who might have been worried about, the stability of that rivalry following the collapse of the Pac-12. It seems like they have reached an official agreement to continue that rivalry, even though those two teams will no longer be in the same conference on an annual basis. So that's really great.
I never thought about that with all this conference realignment. What would happen with rivalries?
Well, it's one of those things where I think most schools are pretty keen to maintain those in-state rivalries, or not even in-state rivalries, but those traditional rivalries. I mean, I think a great example, a great model to follow, honestly, is like Notre Dame, right? I mean, they still play USC every year. They still try to play Navy as much as possible. Georgia Tech always happens, even though those two schools are not in the same conference, right? I mean, we've got Florida State. So I think at the end of the day, while it might, there's always a chance it might get lost in the mix as teams just try to focus on schedule quality of out-of-conference opponents. I think hopefully those two teams will try and stay good enough for each other to make sure that rivalry stays the same. Cole, welcome back. It seems like you're working a lot better technologically right now.
Yeah, so, had a lot of issues. Apologies about that.
Oh, no problem. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. And we were just talking about, before Tano went through his card, we were talking about the top 4 and how Washington kind of beat out Florida State according to the College Football Playoff Committee. And we were talking about how when the show was me, you, and Gracie about a week or two ago, we were all kind of in agreement that it's hard to move an undefeated team down because we kind of feel like, especially when it comes to like the number 1 spot, right? Because it's like you should be able to hold on to a number 1 spot or a top 4 spot until you mess up. And while Florida State really hasn't done that, there is some credence to the idea that Washington might be a better team than Florida State right now. So do you feel like you're in agreement with the College Football Playoff Committee's decision there?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a tough go, right, with Florida State losing Jordan Travis with his season-ending injury, right? But, the committee always says when it comes down to it, they're looking for the 4 best teams, right? And I think at this point now with that injury, we'll see what happens. There's still plenty of games left this weekend to work everything out. But I think, heading into tomorrow's slate of games, I do believe that Washington should probably be there. But you have this Michigan and Ohio State game that's going to decide a lot. I don't think Florida State is necessarily out of it. And then you have all the conference championships that we got to get through too. So, just because Florida State was knocked down one, I don't think that they're necessarily out of it. And like you guys have been saying, an undefeated team, it's hard to have an undefeated team and not be one of those top 4 teams. Right. So I do think if they, win out and they take home the ACC championship that against Louisville, that's a big win on their resume. And I think it's hard to keep them out of the playoffs at that point, whether they have their starting quarterback or not. But I think at this point, this week with all that's happened and how Washington has been playing, I do like Washington over Florida State as the number 4 team because I think, they're a better team overall because of that injury at quarterback. And, that's what the NCAA wants. They want the 4 best teams that are going to bring in the ratings. And, Washington probably is going to help them with that over Florida State at this point. But on the flip side, I mean, having Florida State not have their quarterback, it kind of makes them a Cinderella. If they go on a run, they do get in and they go on a run in the playoffs without their starting quarterback. That would be a hell of a story too. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But I don't disagree with having the Huskies in the 4 spot.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, it would be really interesting to see. I feel like while I wouldn't really call them a Cinderella yet, I do feel like this Florida State team has kind of, as good as they have kind of been an outsider, right? Obviously, they were really good. They were that national championship team now 10 years ago. They were in the very first college football playoff, obviously with those Jameis Winston years. But it's kind of taken them some time to kind of get back up to, like national prominence. And I think people are really high on them this year. And they've had some weird games, but I think it'll be very interesting to see how this last kind of stretch pans out for them. So we've got Tondo's card. You want to give yours, starting with your locks, your regular picks, and holding off with your game of the week?
Yeah. So for my locks, FBS lock, I'm taking Louisville money line over Kentucky. Good rivalry game. I know we talk about these 2 teams a lot this year on the show. Their rivalry is usually discussed in basketball terms, but 2 good football teams, especially Louisville, they're having a great year. I just like Louisville more than Kentucky in this game. I think they're rolling. They're getting ready to play in that ACC championship, and they've had a really great year. So I think the spread was 7.5 in that game. I don't know how it's going to go. It might be a close game, so I didn't want to touch the spread, but I'm going to take the Cardinals over the Wildcats money line for the lock there. And then my FCS lock, we're in the playoffs now in the FCC conference or division. And North Dakota State is playing Drake. North Dakota State has been one of those powerhouses the last, decade. They've won plenty of championships. They've been there. And that just kind of experience with that program, I think helps them in these types of games. So, Drake's a good team, but I'm going to take North Dakota State over Drake money line for my FCS lock of the week. For my regular picks, got a good amount. I have fallen to last on the board. I don't know if we've discussed this, but somehow that happens and it's not good. So, I'm just going to stay with the same, formula that I've been going all year. It hasn't really been working, but hey, last week, maybe we can turn that around. So a lot of picks, but I got Fresno -5 over San Diego State. 5 points, I just feel like isn't that much. I like the Bulldogs there. They're coming off 2 straight losses to San Jose State and New Mexico, which is kind of surprising with how they started out the year. They were, hot out of the gate, and they've kind of simmered down. But, I just don't see them losing 3 in a row. So I like them to bounce back against a struggling San Diego State team that's 3-8 currently. I'm going to take Kansas -7 over Cincinnati. I've been rolling with Kansas, and they've kind of been letting me down. They're also coming off 2 straight losses against Texas Tech and Kansas State. But, this is still a good football team. They've, performed pretty well on the offensive side of the ball this year. Cincinnati's struggling. They haven't had a great year. A 1-score spread. I like the Jayhawks to take that. So, they're averaging 32.5 points per game on offense. So, I think they'll put up a lot of points against Cincy's defense, and I like them to cover at least a touchdown. So I'll take them -7. I got in the Big Ten, Wisconsin and Minnesota, which is, an interesting game. And I was doing a little research on this and I didn't realize it, but this is actually the 133rd meeting between Minnesota and Wisconsin this year, this rivalry game. And it's actually the most played rivalry in college football, which I didn't know. And on top of that, the all-time record is tied 62, 62, and 8 ties. So, there's a lot at stake for these 2 teams. They're both middle of the pack. They're both already bowl eligible. The game is in Minnesota. I think it's going to be a close one. I just like Wisconsin more. The spread is 3 there. So I'm going to take the Badgers just because, Minnesota's been struggling this month. I mean, they've had 3 losses in November alone. They've been outscored 113-59 in those 3 losses. So they're struggling putting up points. I like Wisconsin's ground game. I think if they can manage the clock, they'll be able to pull that one off against Minnesota and the Gophers. So I'm going to take the Badgers -3. Then down to the SEC, I'm taking Bama over Auburn in the Iron Bowl. Bama's favored by 13. They've been rolling. Ever since that loss against Texas early in the year, they've just kind of turned themselves around and look like old Bama again, right? That machine that just keeps running. And, they know what's at stake at this point, right? They're gearing up for an SEC championship game with Georgia, number 1 team in the country. And they know that, they pretty much have to win out. They have to take care of Auburn this week and then probably beat Georgia if they want a chance at the college football playoff, because the committee still has them up at 7 or 8, I believe. So, a lot of teams still ahead of them, but I think if they take care of business this week and then, somehow upset Georgia in the SEC championship game, I think they have to be one of those 4 teams in the college football playoff. So, I like Bama, but look, the Iron Bowl is one of those rivalry games where anything can happen. We've seen it in years past. I mean, the last 3 wins that Auburn has against Bama's been ranked in the top 5. So it's not like Auburn can't knock them off. We've had crazy games such as the return 6, whatever it was 10 years ago. It's always a good game, and it is in Auburn this year. So, it might be a tight game, but I just think Bama is – they're on a mission. They know what they need to get done, and they've been rolling over their opponents. So I'm going to take the Tide -13. I got SMU over Navy. Pretty big spread there. It's 19.5, but SMU's at home. They're 5-0 at home this year. This team has kind of gone under the radar. They're 9-2. Really good team this year. They have the 14th ranked defense in all the country and the 10th ranked offense. So, well-rounded team. And I just think, Navy, we've talked about this. They've struggled and they're just kind of a one-dimensional team. They run the ball with the triple option. I think if SMU and the Mustangs can, stop that run attack by Navy, they're going to have a hard time putting points on the board. And I don't think their defense is going to be able to stop SMU's offense. So 19.5 is a lot, but I think they'll be able to cover that at home. And they're playing for, the American Conference championship. If they win this game, they're guaranteed a spot in that championship game. They can still get in if they lose, depending what happens with UTSA and Tulane, but I think they're looking at this game as it's a must win. We have to get into the conference championship and take care of Navy. So I'm going to take them 19.5. And those are my picks, and I'll hold off on game of the week.
Yeah, great picks. That I kind of wanted to go through it with you guys too, because when you were mentioning the SMU pick, because the American Athletic Conference is in a really interesting spot right now, along with, I think it's very similar to what we're seeing right now with the Big 12, in that, they're a conference which I don't really love, but it's just one of those things about college football where they don't have divisions in their conference, right? So the top 2 teams in the conference just make the championship game, along with the Big 12. So right now on top in the American Athletic Conference, we've got Tulane, SMU, and UTSA, all respectively in order, and they're all 7-0 in conference play. Tulane, obviously, 30 minutes from now, from the time of recording, is kicking off against UTSA, basically to punch a ticket into the conference championship game. Then in the Big 12, we've got Texas, who I'm pretty sure almost are they just need to win today to get a spot in the Big 12 championship game, because they are 7-1 in conference play. And then right under them, they've got Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, and Kansas State, respectively, all at 6-2 in conference play. Now, this could get a little dicey, because Oklahoma, remember, did beat Texas earlier this season, and then Texas has wins against pretty much everybody except for Oklahoma. So I believe I think Texas is pretty much in, if I'm not mistaken, but it'll be very interesting. So for you guys, out of Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, and Kansas State, who would you like to see the most in the Big 12 championship game?
What would be my gut says Oklahoma, but I would love a Kansas State running back from last season type of situation as well.
Yeah, that's spot on. I would say the same thing. Oklahoma's actually playing right now against TCU, and they're dominating that game. So they're probably going to get a win, which helps them in this discussion. But I mean, I think either way, whether you have Oklahoma or Kansas State, Oklahoma and Texas, that puts up a Red River rivalry rematch, right, in the conference championship. And they're both going to the SEC next year, right? So kind of last hurrah for their time in the Big 12. But I agree. I wouldn't mind seeing Kansas State back in there trying to defend their title. But, if I had to pick one, I would say the Sooners against the Longhorns. That's probably what, the best matchup.
Yeah, and so just for reference, so like you mentioned, Oklahoma is currently up 52-37, the final seconds of the third quarter against TCU, and then Oklahoma State is up. Oklahoma State is playing BYU tomorrow at 3:30, and then Kansas State is playing Iowa State at 8 tomorrow night, and so it seems like all three of those teams are going to get a win. So if that's true, then we will get a Texas Oklahoma State Big 12 championship game, which I think could be very exciting. So I'm going to go into my card real quick, starting off with my locks of the week. In my FBS lock of the week, I've also got Louisville, but I'm taking them in the spread minus 7.5 over Kentucky in the Governor's Cup. In the FCS playoffs, round 1, I've got Lafayette over Delaware. This is going to be a really tough matchup. I'm not super confident on this one, but just seeing how Lafayette kind of stormed through the Patriot League this year, only losing to in league play, only losing to Colgate. I mean, that's really impressive. Delaware is obviously a very strong program in the CAA. The CAA itself is a fantastic conference, but I just don't think the quality of teams they've played have really been in the same vein as Lafayette this year. So that's why I'm going to go with the Leopards to move on to the second round. For my standard card, I've got 4 picks here. I've got Alabama. I'm taking them in the spread, minus 13 over Auburn in the Iron Bowl. Washington, I've got actually in a teaser over Washington State in the Apple Cup. I'm going to take them all the way down to -20. I think they're going to dominate in that game. Washington State obviously has not been super strong, but we'll see what happens, when they go forth with the Pac-2 next year. And then this was kind of a weird name for this rivalry. I mean, it makes sense, but it seems like it's one of those ones that's kind of been tacked on in the last couple of years, I believe, by the Florida Board of Tourism. And that's Florida State -6.5 over Florida in the Sunshine Showdown. Then my last pick on my card is Rutgers money line over Maryland. Both these schools I feel like they kind of started off hot. I mean, especially Rutgers. Rutgers has kind of been like the betting darling this year for a lot of people. And obviously it's one of those things where the Big Ten is just too good for an emerging program to really make a huge splash. But they made a splash where it's most important, in the hearts of college football fans everywhere. And I think they're going to finish it off with a win over Maryland. And just to correct myself on the Sunshine Showdown thing, it was not the Florida Board of Tourism. It is the Florida Department of Agricultural and Consumer Services. So
they're calling shots in football
yeah,
names.
That is who coined the Sunshine Showdown between Florida and Florida State. Now let's get into our biggest game of the week. Depending on where you're from, I think, there are a lot of really big games this week, right? But I think in terms of a national conversation, in a college football playoff conversation, and, if you're one of those people that really cares about it, a TV ratings situation, right? That is the game. There's no other name for it. It's just the game between Ohio State and Michigan. Obviously, this is one of the oldest, most contentious rivalries in all of college football. These past couple of years, it has been even more intense, with both of these teams having national championship aspirations year in and year out. Michigan, after years of falling to Ohio State throughout the 2010s, could potentially be going for their third consecutive victory over the Buckeyes to punch a ticket to the Big Ten championship game. This one will be in Ann Arbor this year. Michigan is a 3.5-point favorite. The over-under is set at 46.5. Fellas, how do you think this is going to go down? Who do you have against the spread and to win it? Starting off with you, Tondo.
I wish I was more confident. This is one of those years where I have no idea what the product on the field is going to come out. Like on one side, which is the pick that I'm going with, I think Ohio State covers, but Michigan wins in Ann Arbor. The other side of it, I could see an absolute blowout by either team. Like I think like Michigan can come in and let up an absolute dud, or they can drop 50 points. And same with Ohio State. So I'll meet in the middle. I think Ohio State covers. I think it's going to be another game like they had against Notre Dame, but Michigan comes out on top.
Yeah, I like that. I think it's going to be a tight game. I don't think necessarily that there's going to be a lot of points scored. Somewhere probably in the 20s. I could see like a 24-21 game, something like that. I got to go with the Wolverines. I mean, I like Michigan, usually root for them. With everything that's been going on with them the last couple of weeks, they've just continued to show out. I think they're trying to make a statement. And we've talked a little bit about this, the implications this game has for the college football playoff. I think, look, if Michigan loses, they might not be in the college football playoff, right? Just because of their strength of schedule this year and how that's all gone. Ohio State, if they lose, they could make it, but with all these undefeated teams, they might be out too. So it's really like this is kind of a play-in game for the college football playoff. And I just think Michigan, they're at home. They have kind of just that extra motivation with everything that's been going on with Harbaugh being out and the whole scandal. I just think they're trying to prove a point at this stage, and a three wins in a row against Ohio State after being dominated by them for the previous decade. I think they're trying to flip the script and say that they're the top program in the Big Ten. So I like the Wolverines. I didn't want to touch the spread. I will say that Ohio State probably covers, but that's not on my card. But I'm taking the Wolverines money line at home.
I like it. So obviously, Coach Harbaugh, with all this controversy around Michigan right now, with the sign stealing and suspensions and whatnot, Coach Harbaugh, it looks like, will not be on the sidelines for this game. So I mean, obviously, they've played a couple games so far without him this season, and they've done well. They haven't dropped a single game. So I mean, how much do you think this has prepared Michigan to come in to this game against Ohio State and kind of lead themselves to a win?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're ready to go. I mean, they've shown that they don't necessarily need Harbaugh on the sidelines on Saturday. I know that's what he gets paid for, to be on the sidelines for these games, but they've showed that they can step up and get it done without him there, and the coaching staff has done a great job, and the players just they have this kind of FU attitude to everyone. It's like us against the world, So I think they're fully prepared. And I mean, even though he's not been on the sidelines the last couple of weeks, he's still been at practice. He's still there for the preparation and everything that goes on behind the scenes, which I think certainly helps. So I don't think it's going to impact them too much. I think this is just going to come down to, who wants it more, and can you block out all the noise surrounding this game and, not let emotion get to the best of you, I guess, because Ohio State, their fans, their players, they're going to be chirping Michigan. That's a storyline. And, what does Michigan do with it? Do they use that to their advantage as bulletin board material, or do they let them, their emotions get the best of them and then, lose this opportunity? So it'll be interesting, but I think they're going to be all right.
Yeah. Just for my take, I think Ohio State has kind of played with a bit of, we talk about Michigan playing with a chip on their shoulder with all these accusations against the program. But I think Ohio State has also played with a bit of a chip on their shoulder. And people have really doubted how much Ohio State can bounce back, considering the losses that they've had in the offseason, right, with the departure of C.J. Stroud. And I think they've shown time and time again that they are ready. They are once again ready to be a national championship contending team. I mean, I point to that win against Notre Dame, that close one against Penn State. Their offense has not really been all the way there, and I think you can kind of say the same thing about Michigan. I feel like Michigan has relied a lot on their defense, which is why I'm going to be taking the under in this game. I think it's going to be like it's going to be like a 24-21 game, or maybe even like a 21-17 kind of affair. And I'm going to take Ohio State plus 3.5, but I will be taking the Wolverines money line. And Cole, like you said, I think this game is going to be one that we've seen in years past, and we've questioned it before. But I think this is going to be the game where if you lose this, you are officially out of college football playoff contention. And honestly, if you're asking me, I think that's the way it should be, right? If you're coming into I don't mind teams coming into the college football playoff with one loss. But if your one loss is to, another team that's also in the field, that makes it irrelevant, right? That already settles the question. The college football playoff is about finding out who is the best team. So when you're giving a team that's already lost to somebody else another shot, you are not effectively trying to answer that question. You're just trying to get a lot of good TV ratings, right? So that's why I'm going to say that this game is essentially, like I've called other games in the past, a pseudo playoff game. I think this is one of the most important rivalry games that we've seen from these two teams in a decade. So I'm going Ohio State money line, taking the under at 45.5. And I'm going Ohio State plus 3.5, under 45.5, Michigan money line. And that's what I got. I like when we all kind of ride on a game together, so I'm going with it one more time. Are there any other games this weekend that kind of catch your guys' eye? I mean, I know there's a couple. I mean, for me, not necessarily in terms of quality-wise, but I would kind of like to see I'm sure it'll be intense with Indiana and Purdue playing each other, but I was kind of curious to see what other games kind of caught your eye this week.
Yeah, one game that sticks out for me is tonight, Oregon State. Oregon State's had a great year. Oregon's right there too in the conversation, and they got to win this game if they want to keep their playoff hopes alive. They're probably gonna play Washington again in the Pac-12 championship, I would imagine. I don't know what the standings look like there, but I think if they take care of Oregon State, they'll probably be the matchup against the Huskies. So, there's still an avenue for them to make the college football playoff too. You win tonight, you go and play Washington in the rematch and you get that victory. And, Georgia loses, one of Ohio State or Michigan loses, Oregon still has a shot to grab one of those spots. So that's going to be a fun game to watch.
Absolutely. Tando, you got anything for us?
Yeah, I think that game, I'm looking forward to NC State versus North Carolina. NC State's now ranked. North Carolina's the Drake May show, which the Giants are probably sadly out of contention for his work, thanks to our good friend Tommy DeVito. Love how we have to state that one, but I like that game. I like just going through the schedule right now. This Oklahoma game right now is a 52-38 absolute shootout against TCU. And one more, Penn State, Michigan State. I'll throw that one. Michigan State is coming out and playing some weird football the past couple weeks. I mean, they drop a dud against Ohio State, but Penn State's also not necessarily performing as they should. So I think that'll be an interesting Big Ten matchup to keep an eye on.
Yeah, a couple games I like here. Let's see. It's kind of tough. You guys got all the really, really good ones on me. Colorado, Utah. Let's see if Coach Prime has just let's see if he can go not 1-8 in his first year in the Pac-12. We mentioned it before, but BYU, Oklahoma State, that's going to be an interesting game. Vanderbilt, Tennessee, a battle between the two Tennessee schools. I think we have a good idea on how that one's going to go. And then overall, just the first round of the FCS playoffs. It's a great bracket to follow. Some really good teams this year. So if you're in between rivalry games this week, I highly recommend you guys check some of those games out. And, for more coverage on college football, our top 25 coming out. It's going to be a great top 25 after this week, because then next week it's conference championship week, and that's obviously going to be the best. So until then, keep checking out the Football House. We'll be here every Wednesday until the end of the season. And then keep following us on Twitter at the house_enterprise. Check out house-enterprise.com on our blog to see updates on college football, college basketball, anything else sports related that kind of interests you. And until then, we'll see you guys next time.